striving to a noble task of peace and caring. I commit to taking responsibility for my actions and their impact upon others. I hold the intention of ongoing development both within myself and for the community, with hope and faith in the possibility of positive change. I repair harm when I make mistakes and strive to forgive myself and others. I will affirm and work towards a community that honors and includes all members, eradicates biases, and respects all cultures, identities, and opinions. I will speak up against injustice and strive to practice infinite compassion. So, that is our overall village mission, and something that we all collectively have worked on coming up with over the past 4 years. Come October, it'll be our 4th year of existence. The original founding members of the community and board are partly with me right now. This is Lee and Hunter and Jean and myself. Lee joined us a year and a half ago. And Hunter and I live in the community. We're both heads of households within the community, and then Lee and Jean support us as board members, as wider community members, and are involved in that way. So yeah, Angelica Village started 4 years ago. We've expanded and grown pretty rapidly. We have 8 households, 36 people. We're all, it's in our strategic plan to all be in the same physical space soon. We're about, I would say everybody's about 2 miles, within 2 miles of each other right now. We're a mixture of biological heads of household with their biological children and foster families. We have our main home, which is where myself and many of the youth who you've seen at the conference live. We're 9 total in the home, and so that's 8 youth and then myself. And then our other families are all families who have decided to join us in various ways. Many have experienced homelessness in the past. Many are interested in being a part of the community and helping us grow. We have a mixture of legal status in the United States, so some of us have refugee labels, some of us are immigrants, some of us were born here, some of us are from Colorado. I think we also have a plethora of other states represented, at least 2 families originally from California. And yeah, our main intention in the community is to build community around people who are seeking it and who might not have access to a well-resourced, loving community because of our structural systems of oppression in the world, whether it be governments warring with each other, class structure that leaves some people experiencing homelessness and poverty even within one of the richest countries in the world, or the struggle, obviously, of everybody coming from Latin America as they try to seek out better futures for themselves and their children. The intention on bringing everybody together in this way is that I think that we're really a global family at this point, and what we do matters not only to ourselves, but it matters to the entire world. And I think if we can develop pictures of how we can coexist in peace and harmony and in a way that we uplift each other, then our world stands a fighting chance at peace and harmony and continuing existence, given the current environmental catastrophes that we're looking at. So, along with the social component of our community, we're also really dedicated to taking the steps to become a sustainable community and incorporating the natural environment into what we do. We have a community garden, and we're working on really developing our own food sources. We're located in Denver, like a little bit outside of downtown, but it's kind of a unique neighborhood where there's horse properties and animals are allowed and those types of things, but there's also apartment buildings. So our hope is to be able to kind of be in that urban rural setting and expand from there. There are some wells around, so maybe totally getting off the grid someday, who knows. And then some other future goals is we want an entrepreneurial storefront to develop the dreams and aspirations of everybody who comes. So everybody a part of our community has incredible dreams and hopes for themselves and their children. So whether that's their own home ownership or starting a business, or we have a politician amongst us, we have a doctor amongst us, we have an astronaut amongst us, and so being able to, a food truck restaurant, I mean, we've got just so many people amongst us, and so being able to create that first launch pad for people, for our youth as they become adults and our families as they settle and really get to focus on themselves and their dreams. Yeah, we're hoping to kind of develop all of these programs as we go. So I think that's a short overview. Am I missing anything? Just glaring and important. Okay.
No, that's great. So, as you can tell by just the makeup of our community, we're diverse. So, we represent, as Renata said, numerous countries. We represent numerous ethnicities, class experiences. We also have members of the community that belong to the LGBTQ community, so we're really pretty diverse overall. And religions, right, and religions.
And legal status.
And legal status, right. So by intention, in terms of who we wanted to have part of the community, we knew we would be diverse. And I think our challenge is more, how do you move from just the presence of diversity to the full inclusion and empowerment of persons? So that's been our ongoing challenge as we've moved along. So what we're going to do in this time is have you hear from people who bring different perspectives about what they want out of the community and what their dreams are. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about some specific things that we've tried to do to be inclusive and use an empowering perspective. Lee's also going to talk about that. And then we'll see where we are on time in terms of giving time for the next presentation. So first is Hunter, who's going to introduce herself and tell a little about her story.
Hello, my name is Hunter Ambrose, and I've been a part of the community for 4 years now. I came to the community in kind of an odd way when I got to Denver. I'm originally from California. I got pregnant, and I was basically homeless, so I went to a shelter to get myself together. And when I was in that shelter, I met Renata, who was a case manager basically for like the aftercare program they had to support people. And so that's how I met her, but she eventually moved on to start Angelica Village. And so she contacted me and she asked me if I would like to be a part of her starting this organization. And so I was honored that she would ask me to do that. And so I basically have just been a part of it ever since. And so I love that, and I tell people that because in that time in my life, I did not know, it was so dark for me, and I didn't know what was going to happen to my life. And out of that pain and struggle came something amazing for me. So I just truly believe in like trusting yourself and that like life will work out in the best way. I end up finding the best people for me. So I just kind of wanted to talk about like my experiences in the community and like kind of like what I bring to it and what I'm getting from it and like why I really support it. So when we talk about diversity, and we are such a diverse group of people, like I appreciate that in not just diversity in like the ways that they've said, but when it comes to age, when it comes to like education and things like that. You know, so I use like my example with like my friend Lee here because like I can truly call her my friend. She's not my worker, she's not my teacher, she's not it's not a power thing between us. It's literally just like my friend that I probably would have never been able to be friends with her or have met her if I wasn't a part of the community. And I feel like a lot of my friends that I have now from the community, I would have never ever been friends with because we would have never met outside of that setting. And so the reason that community empowers me is because I'm coming from a homeless situation and I'm not being treated as if I'm that homeless person though. I've been given an opportunity to be on the board where I am able to make decisions or assist in making decisions, and that's an empowering thing, where it's not just, a couple people at the top making decisions that trickle down and affect you, but that you are actually sitting at the table where they're being made. As a young person, I think I was about 22, 23 when I was starting to be a part of this, and so, I'm sitting at the table with people that are much older than me and much more educated, but they value what I have to say, and that is amazing to me. The different opportunities that I've been able to have because of being a part of the community, when it comes to my education, I've had an immense amount of support, and I have 3 children, and I came to the community when I only had 1. So this community has watched me get pregnant 2 more times, has supported me through all those times, baby showers, diapers, people visiting, people coming to take care of my kids so that I can go to work and that I can go to school. And this is like my family. This is what your family does for you, and this is what they've done for me. I was able to do an entire cosmetology program and graduate, and they were there for my graduation. And then still, I'm still in school. I'm back in school now because I wanted to go to school for accounting, because I wanted to open some businesses that we can tie into Angelica Village to help sustain the income and create something that we're creating, like wealth for the community and sustain ourselves. I've been able to, and I've had support in that. I've had support, and I was able to actually go to India and study abroad for 2 weeks, and the entire community helped me with my children. I have 3 kids, and that's so hard, and they're all under the age of 5. So, who gets to do that with 3 kids, and you're under 30, and the way that the society is, I consider it a privilege to even be going to school at this time, because as a mother, you usually have to put work first. So, and that opened up my eyes to the world, and being able to accept other cultures and being open to other religions and other belief systems, and understanding how the world really works outside of being in this bubble I feel like we're kind of in here. I'm kind of going over all those things. So I've lived in the community, like in housing, for about 2.5 years. And so that's been amazing. I'm from Los Angeles, and that's a city, so I was never around chickens or horses or anything like that, and I was totally scared of the chickens. And but now I have 5 chickens, and I have a garden, and it's just really amazing to go out there and pick your own onions and salad, and cook your own stuff from your own garden. So that's also an empowering thing. That I know that actually this past year when the government shutdown happened, my food stamps got cut off, and so did my financial support. And if we had food in the freezer from last summer, from the garden, and that's kind of what got us through a lot of the time. So, it does matter that things that we're doing. And so also I've learned new ways on how to deal with conflict. We're learning about restorative justice practices, and it's sad to say that this whole time of me living, I never learned how to communicate properly. I never learned how to deal with situations. I would just get upset and yell, and I didn't know how to deal with my own emotions. And so in this community, I have learned, or I am learning still, how to deal with those things, and in a way that's mature and that I've never had before. So that's an empowering thing, to be able to control my own self. I've had a stable life. I'm able to be stable and not, going in and out of homelessness. So I've been stable for 4 years, and I have not gone back into homelessness, and I truly feel like I never will be in that place again. And yeah, so that's basically, kind of like where I'm at. And I want to be part of the community for life, whether I do, move to different places. I still, at the end of the day, the community is always like a place that I know that I can come to. So that's what I feel about Angelica Village.
You want to share your story?
Sure. My name is Mohammed Hussaini. So I'm from Afghanistan. I grew up in Pakistan. I was in refugee 5 years ago when I was 13 or something. I was living in the with Russian family, foster family. So they were just me and my foster mom. So it was just like she always went to like work holidays. So I was at home. It was just like kind of, in my background, my culture is just like like around a mile, everyone, how many people are there, how many your neighbors, we just like kind of family with them. So it was just like kind of really hard for them that time. Then my caseworker was asking when you get old, you just like depressed, you want to move or not else. Because I met her in bowling, so we just like kind of had conversation at bowling.
Was it in a bowling alley? Yeah, you never not at a bowling alley.
Yeah, when I met her, so she was just like, and my other foster brothers, they're at home right now. They thought I'm from China. So, something like that, I think. Then, I don't know how she was asking like some question, we had conversation, and she gave me her number anytime to come over or something. Then, I said, yeah, then I moved here. I saw there was a lot of people around, just like, every day is just like kind of new people all the time. It was just like, it's just changed, just like, it's like helped a lot. I never thought that I'm gonna like see some people around, It was just like, for first day, next year was like kind of fight for me. There was like, no one in the street, no one is just like, yeah, so that was just like helped me a lot with my grammar. I still like learning English, so I always like talk to them in English, like they always help me with everything. So it's just like help a lot. Just like that's the good thing being in community, you have a lot of people to like support you in every moment of your life, just like getting you through. And yeah, so I think that that's
There's a lot of tutoring that goes on, a lot of English words and what do they mean. I tutor one of the young women, and she's studying to be a medical assistant, and we were talking one day about what drawing blood means. Well, she was thinking of drawing. And I'm like, no, let's see, drawing blood, and I draw little pictures and I poke at me, and there's a lot of times where we're just sharing language and tutoring about English, which is not an easy language to learn. So Lee's gonna tell us a little bit about her, how she got here.
Yeah, so good morning. Thank you all so much for being here. I think the way I got here, I grew up in rural farming country in northern Colorado. So we lived in a house where people were driving up the driveway every morning at 7 a.m. to have a cup of coffee and talk about the weather and farming things. And that was just how I was used to being in the world, like around a lot of people, lots of community. And that sort of helped me find my way to Waldorf education when I was a young mom. And I was really seeking that community for my own children. And as I saw the beauty of Waldorf education, I became very interested in anthroposophy, started studying Steiner, and eventually I was that full-time volunteer at the school, who then went on to be, I did administrative and admissions work for the Denver Waldorf School for about 9 years. And I've been working with Waldorf education for about 19 years. And that's how I first met Renata when we were working together at the Denver Waldorf School. And I love young people. I love the excitement and initiative and the passion that they bring to the world. So that's really where I've kind of put my time and energy in the world. And so when Renata was telling me about this vision and idea that she had, I just said to her really early on, like, when you get ready to do this, let me know. And so here I am. And I just want to say, like, having Hunter as my friend, having Jean as my friend, having Renata and Ali and these incredible young people, my life is so much richer and fuller, and I have such gratitude, right? So it's like being in diversity, if we don't have that, like, we miss out on so much in the world and what other people are trying to bring and teach us. So people often ask me, do you mentor people? And I don't say that I mentor people, because I receive as much as I bring. into relationship in the community. So it's a real incredible privilege for me to be doing this work.
And I'm Jean, and I know Renata because she was a social work student getting her master's in social work at the University of Denver, and she was in one of my classes. And she immediately struck me as somebody who was serious about learning, which teachers love, and had this idea. And so we worked together, and she did an independent study to develop the idea for Angelica Village. And so I said, when you're ready to do it, like Lee, I'll be there to help. And so my role has been mostly in development and policy work and administration and management and figuring out a lot of those pieces of what we do. One of the things that we've done to try and organize ourselves, and there's some copies of this over there, and there's some brochures and cards, and some copies of a couple policies, and if you want any of our other policies, you could sign up over there and we'll send them to you. But we've decided to frame what we do as dimensions of health. And this is just a little diagram, you can't really see it, I can pass it around, but we have relational health, physical health, financial health, social, emotional, and mental health, spiritual health, educational, vocational, and intellectual health. And so it gives you a perspective of kind of what we're doing. I actually had no background in the work of Rudolf Steiner or Waldorf schools. I come from a social work background, and as a social work professor, my work has been in community organizing and community work, and particularly in the work of empowerment of women who live at the intersection of financial vulnerability, race and class issues, and trauma. And so I started a nonprofit with a colleague that ran for 20 years that worked with women in that capacity, and studied over that time this idea that empowerment happens at 3 levels. It happens at the individual level, so people want some sense of control over the decisions that affect their lives. As Hunter talked about, she has an opportunity now to make decisions for herself because she has some stability. And so that kind of empowerment, working on your relationships with people, so interpersonal empowerment is also a part of it. And then finally, there's political and community empowerment. And we've looked at ways that how can we create the conditions. We don't empower people, we create the conditions so that empowerment can occur. And we've done that in different ways. And one of the ways we've done that, as Hunter was alluding to, is through policies. And another way is through restorative practices. And I still remember, I use this example a lot, so we worked for months on our policies about various issues. And so we were doing a policy on abuse of alcohol and drugs, I think. And so we were writing, and of course we have a lawyer on the board. So the lawyer comes from the lawyer perspective, and I'm there coming from a social work perspective. And then we're trying to come from the constituents of the community perspective. And at one point we wrote something, and Hunter says, "This just sounds like another group home policy." And I've had enough of those in my life. So that was really good feedback. So how could we kind of redo something that made it more inclusive for everybody? And so we're constantly asking ourselves that question and struggling and working through that kind of work. The other thing that we think is really important in creating conditions of empowerment is in increasing people's access to experience. So even this road trip, is an example of that. And I like to talk a lot about social capital. And those of us that have privilege, like myself, and have a lot of social capital, how can I leverage that for people who don't have that? And so you described that, Hunter, when you said, I would never get to meet people like this if it weren't for the environment where we have community meals and we have conversations, and it's not formal, it's informal as it relates to building people's social capital. Hunter had this idea for a new program for us to help with financial capital. So we've gotten some funding to do a savings and debt reduction program. I mean, the debt that people that don't have financial resources carry. I mean, the debt of one of our community members who went on a toll road, didn't realize he was on a toll road. In Colorado, we don't have toll roads, except for one now around the city of Denver. He owes $600 in a bill, something like that. $900 because he didn't pay his initial tolls. That kind of debt prevents him from doing almost anything. So we're working to help people with those really concrete day-to-day needs, as well as being part of a bigger community. So restorative practices is something that's been important to us, and Lee's going to say a little bit about that.
So when you think about the criminal justice system here in the United States, it's really based on this completely punitive structure that's pretty dehumanizing, demoralizing, and it strips people of their dignity. And when we even look at discipline and policies in corporate America and even our educational institutions, those impulses tend to be pretty punitive in how we work with people in conflict when harm occurs. And one of the things that we're really striving to do as a community is to be a restorative community. And there's a tremendous amount of work that's been done around the world, but especially here in the United States and in the state of Colorado, around bringing more restorative justice into the criminal justice system. And out of that impulse, there is a movement doing restorative practices in community. And when we talk about being a restorative community, it is really about maintaining that dignity, that humanity of the individual. It's about creating community as our foundation, because when we have relationship and conflict comes up, we have a very different way of encountering each other and working through that conflict together. So as a community, we've really committed ourselves to doing training on what it means to be restorative. We've done facilitator training, and there are some of us who've been doing that work a little bit longer. And when things happen, as they do, whether it's our day-to-day interpersonal relationships or it's like something big happens in the community, we want to have a way that really helps people be together in that process that can be very difficult, but we know that it's safe and that really shepherds us all through towards a common goal at the end. So we sort of look at these 5 R's of restorative work. It's about respect, it's about relationship, it's about responsibility, it's about repair, and it's about reintegration. So when I've made a mistake and I've caused harm, how do I get to come back into the community and be seen as the person I am today, not that person who made that dreadful mistake a few weeks ago? That's a big piece that we really try to look at. So what I would say is that, restorative work is an ongoing process. It's almost a new language for some of us because we've been so socialized and conditioned into these really punitive justice systems. It can be a big challenge for some of our community members who have, especially if they've experienced incarceration, like they have an idea of like, well, this is what happens when you take something that belongs to someone else, or you have an accident in the car, like this is how you should be treated. And as a community, we're saying, actually, we want to look at what were the circumstances that led to that situation, what were people thinking, who was impacted, and then as a community, having a voice in how those harms are repaired. And even when 2 people are in conflict, it can really impact others around them. So having this opportunity for people to come together to say, know, when you guys were in disagreement, like it really impacted me because then I didn't have a ride to work, or like all the multiple ways that people can be impacted in those harmful situations. We get to all talk about our experience, and then we all have agreements. We all help make those agreements about how we repair harm and how we want to work together going forward. And I love this restorative idea of that we're always working towards how we can do things better the next time. And, you know, agreements can be pretty short term, they can be simple, like, I'm really gonna just acknowledge, like, I really impacted you and I am so sorry, like, I need to hear from you. Like, how that messed up your day, like, I wanna hear your story. And so that story is really essential to what we do in our restorative work. I would say our other challenges that we have in doing restorative work is this idea of responsibility and accountability. Renata and I have talked a lot about this because as a white person, I have a lot of ideas about what accountability looks like. And I've had to really learn to unpack all of that and to see that I come into all these situations with my privilege, my bias, my ideals, my values, and those are going to be really different than other people's life experiences and their cultural values that they bring in. So that's a place we have a lot of opportunity to do that deep interpersonal work. I would say, you know, our whiteness is often a big challenge. Our white fragility gets in the way. We're in some difficult situations, and so that's a place where we're really committing to do that work for each other. The last thing I would say is if you're interested in looking at your own white fragility, as if you identify as a white person, like there's a wonderful book by Robin DiAngelo called White Fragility, and it's really, really been helpful for me in learning how to be willing to like step into uncomfortable situations, to hear what I need to hear, and really make the changes that I need to make to really support the community.
Yeah, it is a great book, I just finished it.
If you want to talk more about restorative practices, please find me over lunch or any other time during the conference. I'm happy to talk about that.
We did want to just take a quick opportunity to introduce the others of our group who are along for the ride. So we've got Abdul and Fareed and Krista and Abdullah and Lynn. And two of them are in our household, and then others are in other households within the community, and then Krista's our amazing coworker who lives just down the street from Ali and Abdullah and I. And we are all here because Ali, leader that he is, was very excited about coming to a conference and sharing his story, but he thought it would be a lot more fun if him and anybody else who wanted to come could take a whole big road trip to see the United States, because we haven't gotten out of Colorado since many of these guys arrived here in the United States. So off we went. But I did want to just acknowledge this incredible group who's been traveling all over the United States and is here at this amazing conference, getting our little tidbits and making our presence. So that's who.
So we're almost out of time, even though we started late, but any questions?
Do you guys want to take 5 or 10 minutes?
Is that okay? You okay? Yeah.
Yeah, and I invite everybody to stay for